Welcome to WRM, Work Relationships Matter. I'm your host, the Edward Jones, a certified life coach who specializes in work relationships. Suresh Eswaran, fellow podcaster, author, and the Prince of Time is my guest today. He is here today to share his thoughts and experiences that will be beneficial to you. Welcome, Suresh.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
And it is great to have you. I've heard great things about you. We're going to talk about you, and then we're going to talk about your book and the whole thing, just to learn more about what it means to be the Prince of Time. But before we get into that, a lot of times we go to workshops, and the first thing people ask is, what do you do when they see that name tag? What I like to do before we talk about what you do, to talk about who you are, how it all began. When we think about it, when we start out, there are people who influence us, mentors, teachers, whatever it might be. They kind of help shape who we are and things like that. So what happened early in life that kind of helped shape you?
Yeah, thank you. And I completely agree with the importance of relationships and work relationships and working on them. For me, a big part of what shaped and who shaped who I am today is the game of tennis, and a lot of my coaches. Yeah, I would say from the age of 3 to 23, for 20 years, pretty much the entirety of my childhood, I was playing tennis mostly full time. And so that's really where I have a huge influence from in terms of life principles. My coaches in college at Vanderbilt University, they were incredibly important in terms of helping me apply these principles to all the other aspects of life, like learning how to deal with failure, looking for and accepting feedback, how to have a healthy relationship with winning, and how to be a better winner as well.
Now tell me, what are the principles? Because you mentioned the principles that help guide you. So what were the principles for tennis?
Well, some of the ones that I just mentioned, I would consider principles, like learning to deal with failure or learning to use failure as a way to grow, or seeing failure as a pathway for growth. Learning to work with other people. When I got to college, it really became about the team, even though tennis is an individual sport. And so I really had to learn how to grow myself while helping grow others, because that was the only way we were going to be the best team we could be. Yeah, all of those things apply in almost every aspect of life, especially in societal life, where you have to interact with other people and your success is dependent on your relationships with other people, which I think is the purpose of this podcast.
No, so what did we're going to talk about both of those, what you learned from winning, what you learned from losing. And I think about tennis. I saw King Richard, the movie, and what they had to go through to get to where they were. And then I listened to Billie Jean King's book on Audible, and you know, her life, but she also talked about other tennis players' lives, and it sounded like in some ways it was really grueling. So so tell me about that life. But first of all, let's talk about what you learned from winning and what that felt like, because you're all out there by yourself, except for when you play doubles. And I imagine you played more singles than doubles, I would guess.
Yeah, I actually played a lot of doubles as well, and I really enjoy doubles. It's a fun game. But I would say now, being able to look back and having learned what I've learned about other aspects of our universe and life, I would say winning is what you can learn from winning is I guess, feedback about where you are in relation to other people that have accepted the rules of a game that you're playing. And the meaning that we place on winning is really our own doing. And so it's useful. It's a useful concept for getting better at things, for growing and for measuring ourselves in relation to other people. And then I would say the flip side of that is the losing aspect, where that's just reality. Like time is finite, and so that outcomes matter. And so when you play a game that other people have accepted the rules to, or are subject to those rules all the same, there are going to be some who win and some who lose, and based on those commonly accepted definitions of what winning and losing are. And I guess when you kind of see them as superficial categories, it makes it really easy to approach winning and losing by process and without ego, and just a constant learning and growth mindset, which makes you very good at winning over the course of time, because it essentially allows you to adapt to reality, or adapt to time. I think people like Tom Brady and LeBron James and Serena and all these people have shown their ability to grow and adapt over time, because of the length of their careers and their success and their greatness. And so it's really not just about one moment ever. It's always about the extension over time and the duration over time and the quality of that existence, or that energy over time. A great one that's occurring right now, especially for the sport of tennis, is Rafael Nadal. Not only is a great person, or a great tennis player, but he's a great human being all around as well. And I think that has allowed him not only to succeed on the court, but succeed as in reputation globally. I don't know a human being that dislikes Rafael Nadal. Same with Roger Federer. I actually saw a poll where Roger Federer's reputation was higher than Nelson Mandela's.
Terms of that is really something. What do you think makes that happen? What is it about him that makes him so admirable?
He's genuine through and through in every moment. And so he's never having to fake who he is. He's just always himself. And it's a deeply wise and compassionate person that operates like Kobe Bryant, in the sense that they just continue to get better relentlessly. But there's a balance in it. It's not it's not like he's sacrificed anything. He loves to do what he does. It's really like, it's a great example of his time entirely being fulfilled always, rather than seeking fulfillment or having to try to fill in an emptiness. It's always full.
It's like something he was born to do. Now, when I think about born to do, starting at 3 years old, is that something that you wanted to do, or is that something that your parents or someone else said, hey, you got to do this?
I think that's literally a choice, and scientifically a choice I could never make at 3. I don't think any 3-year-old's able to see what my mom saw in the game of tennis, in terms of, this will keep my child out of trouble and he'll learn a lot of good things and meet a lot of good people in good places, no matter what.
Right.
I think that's what my mom saw and put me in it.
Right. And it's something that you enjoyed as well, right?
Yeah. I think for sure a lot of suffering there, because I didn't have the perspective I do now, or the understanding of winning and losing. I took that personally, in terms of that was my identity, as many people do. And so, there's a lot of suffering, of course, but there was a lot of learning, of course, as well, even if that learning took place way after. But yeah, I've met so many people from all over the world. I've traveled, obviously. I've learned so much. I've become the person I am because of the game of tennis and my time playing tennis and all the people. So, like I said, like I perceive my own time in my own life to be entirely filled and fulfilled already.
Now, one thing that I think about is that, we all have that ego starting out. We want to win. We want to do all those things. And, you've gotten to a place where you're more balanced with that. Now, when did that epiphany happen for you? Because at one point you're saying you're probably doing that grind and gritting your teeth and I want to win, and you're losing this hard and whatever. And winning is way, way up and losing is way, way down. But you've got the balance now. So when did you find that?
I think it probably came after I stopped playing tennis, around like 2015, near the end of that year, where I stopped playing tennis, and then I had a self-identity crisis of who am I if I'm not a tennis player? And that's around the time that I kind of started to think about time, and started to really learn about it more full time, I would say. And then from there, as you naturally learn more about time, you realize there's actually no space for the ego to exist. It's a misunderstanding about how we have to exist in time. And that stems from culture and not really any one person's fault. It's more of our culture being founded on Isaac Newton's idea of absolute space and time, and we haven't really adapted to Einstein's relativity and quantum mechanics yet. But those have big implications about philosophically as well as physically, in terms of what we can do with technology, but how we relate to things like space and time and nature and our technologies and ourselves and all that.
So when you talk about this, and I think about the title, The Prince of Time, and we're getting into that one. I really want to delve into that, because this is going to be probably the most unique interview that I've had, because the thing about space and time and all of that, and how your experiences led you up to this. Let's talk, get into that a little bit more about how our listeners could learn more about the idea, because I think about the idea of competition. I think about how it can be destructive. I think about how it can be helpful. But when you look back and you say, I had this, and I think a lot of athletes have that identity thing, because are you the sport or are you something else? And if I don't do that anymore, then who am I? That is very, very real for a lot of people. Whenever they quit that sport, whether it's at the age of, gymnasts and tennis players may end it a lot earlier, but people go in even after Tom Brady, if he ever quits, he'll go through that. So let's talk about how that epiphany and how it worked with you, with the identity and all those things, because I think former athletes need to hear this, especially.
Yeah, I think everything starts with like an observation of reality. You can't adapt to something if you're not aware it's there.
Okay.
And I guess I initially allowed myself to enter the crisis of a self-identity crisis. And I kind of directly dealt with it for a few months, every day, kind of just going back and forth and trying to figure it out. And that's what allowed me to be open enough and aware enough, I guess, to kind of come to this idea that we all needed time, even from a business sense, which is kind of where I started pulling the thread. But I would say once I started to learn more about time, it was just a slow unfolding of awareness and behavior change, I would say. And my own understanding of my own self and relationship to self, all of that naturally starts to open you up to the rest of the world, and again leaves little space for your own ego. Not to say that there's not a self there, because there's always self, even unconsciously, if you want to call it that, where like an insect can move its body around other things in its environment, right? So in that sense, we all have selves, right? But I think once you come to the realization that everything is deeply interconnected, or everything is just there, present, or one, whatever you want to call it, it's hard to really, it's almost like foolish to lead with ego. It's less useful because you cause your own suffering in a place where you pretty much can create whole worlds and whole realities, because of the time and place we're in as a species.
That's true. 'Cause I know when I stopped playing football, that was part of my identity. And then I had to stop because of an injury. And my life was consumed with it. You know, all the people I knew, everything I did was centered around that. So when I quit playing, it's almost like that whole world, I actually learned a whole new world that I didn't even, I was on a college campus, and it was like, all this is here. And I think, I didn't know all this was here because I was so focused on this thing. But it's also really kind of, since that was my life, I really, for about 2 years, I couldn't even go to a football game. It's like, that's where I belong. And I can't be near that because of that. And I think about, the people around me, I probably was a little bit harder to get along with or whatever. It's like that as I was going through that. Now when you were going through it, the people around you, how was that for them?
I mean, it's not like I was acting out or anything. It was like I think it's for most people an internal crisis.
Okay.
It's something you can receive help from others, but ultimately it's something you have to do for yourself and with yourself. Right. I think that's by nature of the issue.
Right.
You can definitely learn from other people because, like you said, it's not a common crisis, or it's not an uncommon crisis.
Right.
It's a similar process that we go through, but you have to go through the process.
Right.
But the structure of that process is very similar. Like life itself, you born, mature, die. And that's very simplistic, but there is a pattern.
Right.
And so I guess it's balancing that knowledge that there is a structure to that pattern, and the fact that you have to uniquely go through that pattern yourself in that process. That's what allows you to grow. Otherwise, it's just you're just idealizing things,
right,
rather than experiencing them.
For sure. Now you've written a book.
Yes.
Would you like to share a little bit about that book and what that's all about? And I guess there are probably a lot of lessons learned in there as well. But
yeah, absolutely. I'll kind of show it actually here real quick. It's this. It's called A Gratitude for Time, and essentially the purpose of the book is to be a very easy bridge for people who don't like to read or don't like to think differently about time and to see different perspectives. So it's a super easy read, and it's written in very easy words because time is something that is relatable to everybody. And just because physicists use weird words or use long decimal points doesn't mean that it doesn't affect everybody. Right. And so that's really the attitude I took in writing it, is to kind of democratize the safety of dealing with time. yeah, I mean, all the religions in the world talk about it. Gratitude, they talk about time. Um, Really, the most important thing in the book is the title, the gratitude for time part, which is essentially a cognitive structure for positive mental health. So it's something that every living being shares mathematically, just by being alive, because no human, no living form chooses consciously to be born,
Mhm.
and they all move towards the probability of death. So there's this inherent gratitude for time that we share with all living things, including other humans, especially. So really, it's a way to positively look at the fact that you're going to die, um, and to be grateful for the time that you do have, because it was a gift anyway.
Right. Now, let me ask you this question, because one of the things when you just trigger something for me, a
Mhm.
lot of people are going through a lot of stress. You know, when as a life coach, I have a lead generation company, and a lot of people are going through a lot of stress. They want to develop positive habits. They want to develop better relationships. Would this book be a way to help them do that?
Absolutely. In order to build positive habits, to do anything really of positive value for your own self, whether it's doing things for yourself, learning about yourself, investing in yourself, whatever it is, you have to learn about yourself through time, or
Mhm.
with time. Everything literally comes down to your relationship and valuation of time.
Mhm.
Um, it it is literally like a primary um, idea that our brains and our minds have been attuned to since they came around.
Mhm.
However you want to call that origin.
Mhm.
Um, and it's true of every brain and every mind. Doesn't matter what kind of brain it is. Human brain, animal, dog brain,
Mhm.
fish brain, whatever. It is a concept that is universally used, leveraged, uh, and adapted to by all brains and
Mhm.
minds, just by nature of how that brain must exist,
Right.
if that makes sense.
It does, because one person once said that they asked a question, what's more important, money or time? And
Yeah.
they said that time was more important because, you know, you can lose money, you can make money, but you can't make time.
Yep. I actually posed that question in my book, and
Mhm.
the way I say it is, what's more valuable, time or money? And
Mhm.
then I kind of pose the question, okay, well, what can you do without money?
Mhm.
You can go for a walk, you can do something. There
Right.
are plenty of things you can do without money.
Mhm.
There's literally and metaphorically nothing you can do without time.
Right.
So
Mhm.
even in that sense, you don't have a choice, really.
Right.
It's like I said, it's a misunderstanding of our being in time
Mhm.
that causes most of our problems and stress collectively and individually.
Right. Now, you used to make a really calm guy, but let me ask this question.
Yeah.
What's the toughest situation you faced and how'd you handle it?
Um, I would say it wasn't a one, like it wasn't an event that occurred in one moment.
Okay.
But I used to live in the Netherlands. I moved there for two purposes. The first and primary purpose was to be with my girlfriend at the time,
Mhm.
and she was Dutch. Um, and then my second purpose that I kind of just made up so I could go there was to do this master's program in entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So I would say the toughest thing that I faced was moving there and then breaking up with my girlfriend, dropping out of this master's program, um, over the course of like the first 4 or 5 months, and then stayed there for another 5 months or 5, 6 months. And even during that, all of it kind of happened at the same time, over the course of weeks and months. And I even broke my face falling off my bike after drinking with friends.
That's an
And
upsetting situation.
yeah, and so I remember sitting by a canal just by myself one time. It was I mean, it's like a cold, brisk morning, but it was sunny out there.
Mhm.
And I just remember I was just like feeling like I was like at rock bottom in terms of just loneliness. I just felt alone. Um, like my parents weren't there.
Mhm.
My mom was not there, obviously. Like I couldn't like find comfort in my ex-girlfriend. That was unfair to her. That would be unfair to her. And I didn't really know any of the people I was living with because they were Dutch and had their own lives, and I was just there temporarily. And I was pretty much homeless as well because I had to find housing again because I was living with her.
Mhm.
So all of that really was a great benefit because I became incredibly strong mentally. Um, I learned a lot about myself, about who I am, or how I behave when things are going really wrong, which I was proud about. And I learned if you're going to suffer, do not suffer alone. And if you have to suffer alone, at least have music.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah. Um, but even within all of that larger scale suffering, there was lots of great moments of like joy with friends and trips and things like that. And I pretty much spend every day learning about time. So
Okay.
all of that allowed me again to be who I am today, and who I'm becoming and have become and will become.
Great. So what do you find most rewarding about all of these experiences? What you're doing now, what you've gained, and is there any pearls of wisdom that you like to share with the audience that you think would be beneficial to them?
Yeah. I mean, as humans, we have to go through time irreversibly. So everything that happens or doesn't happen matters,
Mhm.
and it's meaningful, deeply meaningful, not to anyone else but ourselves.
Mhm.
Right. And so for that reason alone, I find everything deeply meaningful, and interesting.
Okay.
Um, and I'm interested to wake up and live my life. Um, one, because I'm grateful for time, but also I'm interested in the life that I live and the way that I lived it and the things that I'm growing in time that
Mhm.
at this point, mostly only I can see, although a few others can see it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And it's a very natural, easy flow with time now. Like I never feel rushed, never feel um bored, or not I do sometimes feel bored, but
Mhm.
I I don't have time anxiety. I feel I have time freedom. And I can always genuinely just be myself.
Well, that is excellent. I think that is definitely the way to be.
Yeah.
Now, if people wanted to learn more about you and what you do, how would they go about doing that?
You can visit my website, which is gratitudefortime.com. I have a book on Amazon also called Gratitude for Time. And I also have my podcast on all of the platforms, which is also called A Gratitude for Time.
Great.
Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Suresh Eswaran is technically my name.
Great. Well, Suresh, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being a guest on the show today. You've definitely had some enlightenment. One thing I think about is I didn't really start thinking about time till I got older. When I was in those wonder years or those growing years, whatever, I'm just doing, not thinking about time. but now I do. So this podcast is timely for me.
That's synchronization, man. It's larger scale things at work.
Absolutely. But thank you so much, and I really appreciate it.
You as well. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Well, thanks, folks. This is the Edward Jones, certified life coach and host of this podcast. To learn more about my coaching business, go to www.prodestinycoaching.com. Take the work relationship quiz, contact me, and let's have a conversation. But most importantly, remember, work relationships work for those who work on them. Have a great day. Welcome to WRM. I'm your host, the Edward Jones, a certified life coach who specializes in work relationships. Now, no matter what type of work you do, work relationships matter. Becky Garrow, Garrow Construction, is my guest today. She is here today to share her thoughts and experiences that will be beneficial to you. Welcome, Becky.
Thank you, Edward, for having me.
And it's great to have you here. And folks, for full disclosure, I met Becky at a UC Davis workshop or faculty meeting. We were in a small group. We started to talk and we thought this would be a good idea to share information about what she does and how she helps people. So this is what we want to talk about today, and we'll get more into that later. But Becky, before we get into that, I know you've been to mixers before. There's a name tag. Someone walks up to you, sees your name tag. What's the first thing they say to you?
That they would say to me?
Yeah.
They would say, Becky, what do you do?
Absolutely. The first thing you want to do is what you do. The thing that I want to do is find out before we get into that is who you are, your backstory. The things that kind of help are people or events that kind of help shape you when you were coming up. Because what I find is sometimes those things help inform the future. So let's talk about the things that help make Becky who she is today.
Yeah, great question. So I was actually born and raised in California. I grew up on the Central Coast. Sacramento is my adopted home. I love it here, but I've also lived in San Diego and sort of in the Southern California area. Growing up on the Central Coast, I grew up in a very small town near an Air Force base. And I would say a big part of my life was being a student athlete. So many years of playing basketball, and actually played at my community college for a couple of years. I played soccer. As an older person, I ran track and field. As a young child, I did gymnastics, had a quick stint in cross country and in volleyball. So sports have been a big part of my life, both as a competitive athlete as a young person and as a recreational hobby here in my older years. So I would say that's really shaped a lot of the things that I'm doing today, and actually a lot of my work practices too.
So what did sports teach you? Because the thing that I remember when I was playing sports, they said, that's character, et cetera, et cetera. So what has participation in sports, how has that affected you? What did you learn from your experiences as an athlete, and all the different things you do regarding that?
I think I was blessed to have a lot of really good coaches that also served as mentors for me throughout my youth. So having not only my own two parents, but several other parental figures growing up, and just people to sort of mentor me and coach me, not only in this specific sport, but other good life skills that every young person needs to kind of be successful in the workplace. But I would say a big part of playing sports is just learning sportsmanship, right? Learning how to lose and win with grace and gratitude, learning how to be competitive, but also be gracious, working together in a team, working on bettering your own skills, learning how your skills can benefit the skills of your entire team. And honestly, a huge part was making mistakes and being okay with making mistakes, understanding the source of the mistake, and then coming up with a plan to improve my skills, improve my communication, to be able to address that mistake in sports or really other areas of my life. I think those skills have been transferable.
Okay, that sounds excellent. That's perfect. So in terms of going through that, what with what you're doing now, describe what you're doing now. And let's talk a little bit more about that. And I want to know if you chose what you do, your career, or if you chose it or it chose you. So
Well,
describe what you're doing, and then let's talk about how you got into it.
yeah, so I would definitely say that my career chose me. I am not doing what I imagined that I would be doing as a young person, primarily because I think as a young person, I thought I would be like an Olympic athlete, and clearly that did not work out. No gold medals in my background here. So I am working in public health. I am a public health consultant. I've been doing this for almost 15 years. And within public health, I really focus on research, evaluation, and project coordination. I don't do clinical trials. Public health is different from healthcare, and that public health is health for the good of the public. So decisions that we make that are good for our public communities, whether that be at the city, state, national, or global level, may not be appropriate for the individual. We're looking at sort of a mass health effort, right? So yeah, I would say that a big part of my public health career has been working with different communities all throughout California and across the nation. I've sort of specialized in working with communities outside of my own, which I've been very grateful to have a lot of mentors who have taught me how to sort of code switch and be able to be sure that I'm being respectful and humble with working with communities outside of my own. But yeah, I've been really enjoying it.
Well, great. Now, I want to definitely get into that, but before I go there, I'm thinking at one point you thought about being an Olympic athlete. Now, the thing that happens though, and the reason I say that is that there's so many people who are really into sports in high school, maybe college, and then that career ends. When that ended, there's an emotional impact there. Did you have that sense of loss when you say, I know I'm not going any further?
I absolutely had that sense of loss. I think that it happened while I was at my community college playing basketball, where I really realized a lot of the scholarship opportunities I was getting offered were for schools, Division III schools. So I was not, I didn't have the skill set to get a full ride to a Division I school in California, which meant that I was going to have to maintain a certain GPA. I knew I would struggle with that. It's really hard to be a student athlete. Your practices, your games, your travel schedule take up so much time. Maintaining a GPA to keep that scholarship, especially for an out-of-state school, would have been difficult. I made the decision that my competitive athletic career was over, and instead I needed to focus on my education. That was a huge identity change for me. I would say related to that, so the area that I originally went into with my undergraduate degree was I wanted to be a dietitian. So I wanted to work with sports teams and travel with them and help athletes understand how to best hydrate and feed themselves for optimal physical and competitive performance. I went to a UC school, and I was just not equipped at that time to be able to handle that course load. I really struggled in school, realized I was not going to be able to complete all of the science courses, knowing I had to graduate in 2 years after going 2 years to a community college for financial reasons, had to pivot and change my major. So there was a lot of identity shifts as a young person, I would say.
And the reason I wanted you to go through that is because our listeners, many of them will be in the same place, that they will be at a certain spot where they, and I feel your pain because I did the same thing. You're thinking it's almost that is your identity. And even if you had become an Olympic athlete, you're still, by the time you stop, you're still relatively young. You probably got 30 or 40 years left of work life. So that point's going to come even if you reach the highest point. So therefore, I want people who are listening to this, who are thinking about, who were athletes, how you make that break and how you make that pivot. And you described it very well. So thank you very much for doing that. That's going to be very helpful to people.
I should also let your listeners know, there was that Olympic pipe dream ended when I was probably 6 or 7. I knew that was going to happen. So don't want to give the impression that I was on the Olympic or championship road there. It was, when someone asks you, you're 5, you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to go to the Olympics. That sounds fun. It's like, okay.
Okay, that's very good. So thank you for that as well. Now you talked about, I just said, was it public health? Is that what you said?
Yes.
And so you talked about working in different communities. Talk to me a little bit more about that and how you have, first of all, let's talk about public health in more detail. Is that environmental health, like water, lead, dealing with those kind of things?
That's definitely a component of public health. So
Okay.
there are usually about 5 components of public health, and one of
Okay.
them is environmental health, right? So that is dealing with pollution, with lead paint. We've had a lot of public health efforts that have been very successful at advocating for safer spaces for people to live, work, play, travel, worship. Another branch of public health is biostatistics. So this is a branch of statistics specific to people. We do statistics with people a little differently than we would with economics, right? Because the dollar stays the same, the human is unpredictable. Another branch of public health is healthcare. So this is in healthcare management, working with hospitals, working with direct clinical care. Another branch is epidemiology. Thanks to COVID-19, we all know our friendly epidemiologists now. Public health was finally trending, but epidemiology is the study of disease and how disease moves through man. And then there is my branch of public health, which is health promotion and behavioral modification. So I work specifically with research and evaluation to evaluate programs that aim to make changes in people's behavior. I would say one of the most famous examples of this, especially in California, is smoking cessation. So this was a decades-long effort led by public health professionals to reduce the incidence of smoking for Californians. We learned that just telling somebody cigarettes are bad for you does not work. We have to give people tools, resources, and the ability to quit if they're interested in doing so. We made smoking prohibitive, so it became really expensive. We had a lot of taxes on cigarettes, right? And we made it inconvenient. You could no longer smoke in bars, in restaurants, in bowling alleys, and now even on beaches and in parks. So these are all sort of the system of public health and how it's a little bit different than individualized healthcare.
That is very interesting. So these are policies that you work through your legislatures?
It can be
Legislative org-
legislators, I've
Right.
worked with school districts, I've worked with state health departments, county health departments, I've worked with tribes and tribal health programs, we've worked with community clinics. Public health is for everybody, and public health can be implemented by anybody.
Right. No, it's really interesting because I was listening to, there was a campaign where the soda industry was working in, I think, Richmond, California, and they were, and a lot of people there have diabetes and other things like that, issues that may be associated with drinking a lot of soda and what is it, high fructose corn syrup, I guess. And so they convinced the people that they had a right to high fructose corn syrup and soda. And so the people actually voted there because they were going to limit it, the amount that people could have. And I guess maybe it was to public policy, but they were able to convince the people that actually it was a right, and they kind of said, don't worry about health, I want my right to be able to drink it. So do you run into those kinds of things from the people you're trying to help? Sometimes fight it?
Yeah, all the time. There's a delicate balance between freedom of choice and between the good of the health for public, right? So I would say one example I think that is related to this would be clean drinking water,
Okay.
right? So we, thanks to efforts of public health, we have clean drinking water. For most parts in California, our drinking water is safe to drink, to bathe, to wash clothes in. Right? That's thanks to public health efforts. There are other public health efforts like the sugar sweetened beverage tax that you're talking about, as well as like smoking taxes that we've decided we're not going to prohibit people from buying soda. We're not going to prohibit people from buying cigarettes, but public health is going to let people know information about the health consequences of consuming these products, and will make, I would say one of my goals working as a public health professional is make the healthy choice the easy choice. It is a reality for some communities that soda is cheaper than buying drinking water, especially for those who don't have drinking water. It is also a reality that there are cultural practices that really promote and even celebrate smoking cigarettes, right? Or other negative health behaviors. We don't want to prohibit people from doing those. It is helpful to make those behaviors inconvenient and to make healthier behaviors convenient. I like to talk about fast food with this. There's a lot of stigma around people with lower incomes purchasing fast food, right? And so we have these campaigns talking about the benefits of going to the store and buying a chicken and your own vegetables and then roasting the chicken and chopping up the vegetables. And I'm sure every parent out there is thinking, after I get off of work and pick up my 3 kids from school, no way am I taking them all to the store and buying a raw chicken and roasting up these vegetables, right? Fast food is cheap. It is easy. It is convenient. It will satisfy your family. Sometimes the kids will get a toy with their meal. And in some areas of California, a fast food establishment is the only place that has a safe place to play. Think of those McDonald's playhouses, right? So it's always a delicate balance of trying to make the healthy choice the easy and convenient choice for people, which is not always the case.
And listening to that, that's a tough job.
Yes, it is.
I'm just listening to you, and I'm actually hearing people talk about that whole idea, especially the ones who are working 1 or 2 jobs and they have to come home and they're dog tired, and the last thing you want to, and you got to help kids with homework, and you're supposed to cook, and you're supposed to do this, and so how do you reach? Making it easy is one thing, but it gets they still have to cook the stuff. And I always hear that food is best in its most natural state, and therefore it's not processed. So, but processed food is convenient, and you put the little stuff on there that makes it almost addictive in terms of eating it. Lay's, you can't just eat one. I think that's true, and it's probably not good for me to eat too many of them, but that does happen. So you talked about working with different communities and getting into it, finding them where they are. How do you get into those communities, develop trust, so they will say, I will do these things? Basically, they're helping themselves, actually, but sometimes people don't want to do that because of the convenience. How do you get into those and get into those communities and kind of get into their mindset?
Yeah, well, that's a really great question. And I would say a big part of that is, and this is where I think public health struggles, it's getting out of your office, out of your midtown location, and working directly with community members and listening to their needs. So I've made all the mistakes in public health, right? So if any young people in public health want to talk to me, please reach out so you don't make my mistakes. But, I think a big mistake in public health is us coming from a top down, telling people what they need to do instead of going from a community up, from the ground up. What is it that you need? I've worked with agencies before who are like, hey, what these people need is information on cancer prevention and care. So go out into the community and do a public health campaign on this. But when we go out to the community, we realize people's concerns are loose dogs, not having sidewalks, not having streetlights, not having a pharmacy in their town where elders can get medication. So there are simpler things that can have a greater impact on the health of a community, but that may be overseen by a large government or nonprofit organization that's not listening to the community members. So my biggest advice for everybody is to listen to the community needs and involve them throughout every step of the process. They know what their people need. They know best, and they know the priorities of the community. And that may not be the priority of public health or of state government or local officials. So that can be really hard to balance, I'd say, in public health work.
Right. So a lot of that sounds like it's education.
It's education, but not from the community members, from the people who hold the resources, the money, and the programs that could potentially benefit the communities.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good, because it's really interesting that when we were growing up, my siblings, they gave their children junk food, et cetera, and my kids were trying, my wife was getting to eat more healthily. And when they ate junk food, they actually got sick. And people say, oh, they're just not strong. They're just, they're doing the stuff, so they're not strong. So they're almost being castigated for eating well. So that was really quite a reversal, because it's like, you're doing things bad for your health, but you are now held in esteem. Have you run into anything like that?
There are definitely health halos around a lot of products. And what I like to remind people is to eat healthy, to eat a diet with a low amount of processed foods means that you have privilege. You
Okay.
have economic stability. A really important I like to tell is of, we were really stigmatizing and punishing people for buying their children, quote unquote, junk food, right? But for many low income people, giving your children junk food is one of the few times in your life as a parent where you can tell your child, yes. Can I go to Disneyland with my friends? No. Can I have this new pair of Nike shoes? No. Can I join this traveling athletic sports team that costs money? No. Can I have a new car? No. Can I get my bicycle fixed? No. Can I have a candy bar that costs 50 cents? Yes, child. I can give you that. It's one of the few times lower income people can say yes to their children. So, it's all a balance. If we really want to start working towards empowering people to be making choices that are best for their health, while also respecting their cultural heritages for foods that may not align with the standard American diet, but are still healthy, we need to ensure that people have economic stability.
Absolutely. Now, the idea of food deserts, are you able to help influence so they can get more, I guess, grocery stores in the area? Because I think about the thing up in Buffalo where that was the only grocery store that was there, and it may be closed, may not open again. So therefore, they would be back into a food desert. So do you kind of help get people get into grocery stores where they can get fresh produce?
I have worked on projects that have strove to increase the amount of healthy, affordable foods to communities in food deserts. So a large project I did was in the Eastern Sierras, covering a couple of tribal reservations that had tribal farmers market. So this was really highlighting indigenous people who were growing food and then able to sell it directly to tribal members and their surrounding towns. And so that was a part of a Center for Disease Control and Prevention funded grant. And we conducted the evaluation for that grant, myself and my team at a former organization before I went out on my own public health consulting. But there's also been work that I've done with a lot of, we call them corner store conversion. So there's a lot of corner markets, and sometimes it's as easy as getting somebody a refrigerator so that they can actually store to make available fresh foods and vegetables, right? We also have to think about transportation. So for folks who maybe do not have reliable transportation or rely on public transportation, what sort of foods are available at a corner market that can be easily transported? We don't want fruits and vegetables that are going to get easily bruised on the way home. We want things that are light and easy for people to carry, because we have to think about our vendors too, right? We don't want to equip somebody with a refrigerator, fill it full of nice, beautiful peaches that nobody's going to buy because they're going to get bruised all on the way home during the summer. So definitely a balance. But yeah, food access is a big component of public health, and there are a variety of different ways that we can address it.
But no, the thing I think about, again, there's that push-pull because you're doing good things, but everybody doesn't want good things, whether it's the individual or whether it's producers or companies. So who you do consulting, how do people connect with you? They say, I want this to help the community. So where do you get your contracts, and how do you get people? Because in some ways you're asking people to do in some cases things they don't want to do, but it is definitely good stuff. So who is kind of backing you in the efforts that you're doing in terms of hiring your consulting business?
Yeah, so I have clients from a variety of different backgrounds. I have government, nonprofit, and for-profit clients, all of them with a slightly different nuance. And I would say a big part of public health is tailoring our outreach and our intervention to the
Okay.
target audience. And we will do that differently. Think of a 16-year-old Black or African American boy living in Los Angeles. We may speak to that person differently than we would a 65-year-old white woman living in Modoc County. Probably different public health interventions, probably different tailoring that we can do for these two communities. I mean, we have tons of communities in California, right? We have a rich, diverse, amazing state. And throughout the state, we want to really identify what are the top public health issues, who's most affected by them, and how do we tailor our intervention to best meet their needs. I just heard on a podcast the other day by Adam Grant. He had a great example of a littering campaign, because littering is a public health issue too, in the state of Texas. And, you know, just based on Texas, we would approach that differently than we did in California. So instead of saying, please don't litter, this is an environmental concern, do what's right, they set up a littering campaign that said, don't mess with Texas.
Okay.
And they had a little bar that said, don't litter. It reduced the amount of litter in Texas by 75%
Oh, wow.
over a year. Amazing. But it's because these public health researchers did a good job at identifying their target audience and understanding how to best appeal and communicate with these folks.
Absolutely. Now, I was just thinking of one thing as you were talking. I do work with our church, and I'm thinking that a lot of times, you know, in the African American church, you'd have the big chicken dinners. I mean, stuff is great, but it may not be the best thing for you. One guy did a thing of greens, which greens are good, but when they cool down, you could stick a fork in there because of all the grease that was there. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's not good for your health. So, for example, if I had was in a community group or something, I said, I really want this community to learn more about the things that you talk about in terms of, you know, eating or not doing soda or whatever. Would we be somebody that could hire you as a consultant?
Absolutely. I would love to work with anyone looking to sort of increase healthy behaviors and helping make the healthy choice the right choice, if that's something that the community want. I actually have worked in African American churches in the Bay Area and Los Angeles with a program funded by the United States Department of Agriculture. It's called Body and Soul. And so it's about instituting healthy changes within historically Black churches in a culturally competent and respectful manner that best meets the needs of the congregation. So a lot of fun stories from that project.
Oh, great, great. So, you know, this is that tough question that you were thinking about. So after all this talking, Becky, what do you say is your superpower?
Well, I would say that my superpower is my confidence. And so because of my confidence, I have a can-do attitude. I am a direct communicator. I know what I'm good at. But as a part of that confidence, I know what I'm not good at. I know when I'm supposed to be admitting that I am wrong. And let me rephrase that. I know when I'm wrong.
Okay.
I am not afraid to make mistakes and take risks. Evaluate when something went right, evaluate when something did not go right. Because of that confidence, there's a lot of positive attributes, but it really requires a lot of self-reflection, right? I know when to say no. I know when to turn down a project that maybe doesn't align with my professional goals and values. I also feel it's really important to state on your podcast that I am able to express my confidence in a variety of different ways because I have benefited from an unjust system. So your viewers may not be able to see me because this is a podcast, but for those listening, I am white. I was born in the United States, middle class. I had a loving and supportive family upbringing, and I do not have any physical disabilities, and I am not suffering from any mental illnesses. So my confidence is a result of those things as well. So I consider myself lucky, and I really try to give back to the communities that maybe did not receive some of the benefits that I did growing up in the United States.
Okay. No, that's very good. Very good superpower, very good explanation. Before we go, though, you do a bike tours in Sacramento. So tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So the background for that, you know, I've been an avid cyclist and working in cycling advocacy. I was actually a board member for the Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocates and served as a commissioner for the City of Sacramento's Active Transportation Commission for several years. I was working with an amazing group of public health professionals at my previous job, decided I was ready for a change. I left my job in 2019
Mhm.
and I incorporated my business. The date of incorporation was March 8th, 2020. We
Okay.
all remember March of 2020. So
Absolutely.
on March 13th, our president declared a national emergency. On March 19th, California issued the shelter in place order. So the types of jobs that I thought I would be pursuing and that I had been working towards, which were on the ground, community based, in person data collection, research, analysis projects, out the door. I gave myself a day to sort of feel sorry for myself and then immediately started pivoting and asked myself, what are the emerging public health needs that I can help serve today? Of course, there was a ramp up period with that. So within that ramp period, I decided to take my love of showing off the beautiful city of Sacramento and my love of riding my bicycle. And in 2020, launched Bon Vivant Bike Tours, which is a bike tour and capacity building business in Sacramento. So not only do we give tours of the capital city, but if you are nervous about riding your bike or have always wanted to ride your bicycle to your workplace, understand how to commute, drop your kids off at school by bicycle, whatever your need is, every tour, every class is a custom tour. To increase our ability to reach Sacramentans and other visitors, we also now offer walking tours for those who may have limited mobility or large diverse groups where a bicycle tour may not be appropriate. So in addition to my public health consulting and working as an instructor for UC Davis, I've also been giving bike tours here and there. It is a side job, it is a passion project, but it's really brought me a lot of joy and helps really bring out the extrovert in me. I get to meet a lot of amazing people from all over the state, all over the city, and all over the country, showing off my beautiful adopted city of Sacramento, California.
Well, Becky, that's excellent. Can you believe it? The half an hour is almost up. So before we go, though, if people want to learn more about you, your tours, your consulting business, where can they go? Websites, social media, what would that be? Just go ahead, or phone numbers, just go ahead and tell us that.
Yeah, so you can call my business line, which is 916-359-9631. Love to talk to anybody who wants to talk public health or bicycles. You can also visit my websites, which have links to all of the interesting photos on social media. I will say that the bike tour website has much more engaging photos, perhaps, than the public health website, but Garrow Consulting, that's Garrow, arrow with a G in front of it. So garrowconsulting.com. You can also visit our bicycle tour webpage at sacramentobiketours.com. And I would love to connect with any people via those websites, via LinkedIn or on Instagram or Facebook.
Becky, thank you so much. You've provided a great deal of information. And yes, you will definitely, our guests will definitely benefit from the things you said. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It was an honor.
Folks, I am D. Edward Jones, Pro Destiny Coaching. You've just heard from our guests today, so definitely go to those websites and check those out. To learn more about my coaching business, go to www.prodestinycoaching.com, take the work relationship quiz, and have a free consultation. Folks, it's been great. And remember, most of all, that work relationships work for those who work on them. Have a great day.